a win-win situation that it will accrue to it.
There are recommendations is given that are particularly targeted at government and the political class because they are matters of the constitution.
For the past 20 years, since the Community Administration, that's at the national level, they've been talking about empowering the citizen through title. Why are they talking about that? When you have title, you have certificate over your property, you can go for facility in the bank or another thing.
And that's the news for now. Good Morning Nigeria continues with Kingsley and Kieran after this break.
Listen to the voice of terror.
Mun an taba mu ne muke karfi in an kyale mu sai mu rauni sai mu rushe ba inda zamu je in ba zo mun suna taba mu ba taba mun nan ne shine daukakan mu kun ga bahish da tsara inda aka bizne galiban shahidan da suka shada wannan jine ne wa'anda da ba inda muka kai don haka wannan taro namu
There's a smarter way to live with Airtel Binge Plan, the ideal data plan for those heavy data moments. Get a 2 GB daily binge plan for 500 Naira. Dial *141# to activate. Live smarter with data.
Airtel, the smartphone network.
Relieve tooth sensitivity with Sensodyne Daily Care 40 milliliters for just 350 Naira only.
Sensitivity is a short, sharp pain that people experience when they have something hot or cold getting to the nerve of the tooth. Dentists recommend Sensodyne. It's able to calm the nerve of the tooth.
Protocol and event management are special skills which can only be acquired through training and experience. NTA TV College JOS is organizing a special 2-week course on protocol, event management, and public relations to upgrade the capacities of practitioners. The course will equip participants with modern skills, techniques, and international best practices in protocol, event management, and public relations. Also, a special 4-week intensive course on nonlinear editing techniques will run concurrently. The course will expose participants to modern techniques and technologies of nonlinear editing. Take advantage of this course to hone your professional skills for premium packaging of your programs and reports. The venue for both courses is the serene and secure environment of NTA Television College, near Old Government House, Rayfield, Jos, Plateau State. Date 19th to 30th August 2019 for the course on protocol, event management, and public relations. 19th August to 13th September 2019 for basic non-linear editing techniques. Course fee 100,000 Naira only per participant. Accommodation inclusive. For more information, please call 0803-314-4383 or 0806-980-9807. NTA TV College JOS, training you to be the best you want to be.
All right, welcome back here. It's still Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Our business correspondent, Kolo Muhammad, tells us of the role of local content when the African Free Trade Area Agreement takes off effectively.
Good morning, and thanks for joining us at this time. The African Continental Free Trade Area is bracing up to revolutionize manufacturing across the continent. The manufacturers in Africa must brace up if gainful competitiveness is their target. A lawyer turned manufacturer says her drive and support for local content.
A message to Mr. President because he triggered us to do this, and we hope to get all the supports we can from them.
Indeed, but farmers that have the new technologies, the new knowledge to sustain and transform. We are talking about transformative agriculture, not the rudimentary agriculture that we are used to.
And finally, the week's proceedings on the floor of the London stock market is about to open. And as always, NTA Business News will bring you up to speed later in the day on outcomes of proceedings when the market closes. Presented in hopes that this package helps you take informed developmental and economic decisions. See you again soon.
Thank you, Kolo Mohammed, for that business report. And next is newspaper review.
newspaper reviewer, Bayo Atoebe, is right here with us in the studios for today's session. Bayo, good morning and welcome.
Thank you, Kingsley. Good morning. Good morning, Kirian.
Kingsley,
good morning, Nigeria.
Bayo, you're welcome.
Thank you.
All right, about 5 newspapers to review this morning.
Absolutely, yes.
Well, let me begin with the Blueprint newspaper. Blueprint newspaper, that's on the right-hand side of the nameplate. We have ex-Savannah sugar workers get 1 billion severance benefit. It's on page 2, boys. That's strange. That's on page 5. Now, below the nameplate, we have change government via elections, not revolution, says the presidency. That story is on page 16. But it has there are 2 writers to that. Why we arrested Shore DSS. The Shore not plotting coup, says Wole Soyinka. All of that on page 16. And now the lead story on Blueprint this morning. Expert unveils remedy for prostate cancer. It's on page 8. And the lead story says federal government earmarks 2.2 billion naira for Uroga implementation. The rider policy won't Fulanize Nigeria, says NI. It's on page 6. And at the foot Timion's murder, page 9 is where you get that story. Ogun fish farmers lament 300 million naira stock.
With 2 riders, Cardinal Okoje, Yakesai, former ministers and others disagree over implementation plan. We are not aware of such appropriation, say reps. Details of that story can be found on page 39. Now, right at the foot of the front page of the Daily Sun newspaper, 3 headlines. Revolution now rally. Don't try it in Rivers. Wike warns. As TUC, NLC, Arewa, and Igbo groups deny involvement. Another headline, with greater details on page 44, Ed Zakzaki's trial. Police beef up security in Kaduna. With rider, go about your business, government tells residents. Another headline, this time with details on page 4, xenophobia. Federal government in South Africa disagree over killing of Nigerians in South Africa. Bayo.
Well, let's start on that sad note. Another Nigerian was killed in South Africa over the weekend, and this was specifically in Johannesburg. And I think this is the crux of the matter, that there's been disagreement between Nigeria and South Africa. That brings to about 130 Nigerians killed in South Africa in the last 3 years. Talking about the other story, 2.2 billion in 2019 budget for Ruga. There is a rider there. Buhari's advisor gives insight about grazing project. If you recall, the federal government has pronounced that the Ruga project has been suspended. It was the proposal of the Federal Ministry of Agriculture. However, the National Economic Council proposed grazing project, which involves 7 frontline states and 6 volunteer states, making 13, is probably what is provided for in the budget that the papers is referring to. Therefore, to have captioned a bold headline talking about Ruga that has been suspended leads a lot of questions to be asked. Be that as it may, there is assurances by security agencies for people in Kaduna to go about their normal duties. This is especially because today there's going to be judgment at the Kaduna High Court about the application for the leader of the Islamic movement in Nigeria for permission to go abroad for treatment. He's been standing trial for culpable homicide and other cases. The other one is from the Department of State Policy. Department of State says that they have arrested the publisher of Sahara Reporters and convener of Revolution Now for crossing the line and threatening public peace. Spokesman for the Department of State Services, Peter Afunanya, says, yes, Omoyele Sowore is with the DSS. He says Sowore has, as a matter of fact, threatened the peaceful coexistence and social harmony of Nigeria. There is apprehension, there is anxiety. Citizens and residents are worried what will happen next. DSS assures that there will be absolute peace on Monday. That is August 5th today. DSS ensure peace and people should go about their normal duties. But meanwhile, the presidency says the era of coup revolution are over. This is the statement issued by the presidency regarding the move by the Global Coalition for Security and Democracy in Nigeria, planning an alleged revolutionary march, allegedly with the aim of bringing a regime change. Statement by Garba Shehu, Senior Special Assistant to the President, says President Muhammadu Buhari upholds the right of Nigerians to peaceful protest and civil campaign as an inalienable right. There is, however, a difference in between peaceful call to protest and incitement for a revolution. He said the ballot box is the only constitutional means of changing government and a president in Nigeria, adding that the days of coup and revolutions are over. He says the president calls on those hiding behind citizens to usurp power through undeclared persons and violent means to come into the open and clear. I took the pains to look up revolution. It is derived from a Latin word revolutio. It means sudden change or a turnaround. The definition in political science is a forcible overthrow of a government or social order in favor of a new system. Synonyms for revolution are rebellion, revolt, insurgency, mutiny, uprising, riot. They include even insurgency or a coup. In political science, it is a fundamental and relatively sudden change in the political power and political organization with the population revolt against government. The 1999 Constitution in Chapter 1, Part 1, Section 1, 2 says the Federal Republic of Nigeria shall not be governed, nor shall persons or group of persons take control of government of Nigeria or any part except in accordance with the provisions of the Constitution. Already, Governor Nyesom Wike of Rivers State says revolution and now protest is not allowed in Rivers State. Omoyele Sowore was a presidential candidate of African Alliance Congress, AAC. He polled 33,953 votes. He was the 10th in the order of the highest votes in that election.
Yeah, but thank you very much indeed. But I'd like to take you back to the issue of Nigerians being killed in South Africa and what may have prompted, the disagreement between the governor and the South African authorities. That may be basically because of the activities of some Nigerians living in South Africa. You recall that some Nigerians kill Nigerians in South Africa. And of course, the incident of last year, that happened in the church in Anambra State in Nigeria. It carried over from South Africa. So there may be basis for argument on the part of South African people, because they may have the dossier of the characters, of certain characters of some, not all Nigerians. There are Nigerians, very good Nigerians living in South Africa who are doing genuine business, legitimate business, and are doing well as well. But most of these involvement, people who are being killed there, may be traced to some nefarious activities, drug dealing and other activities that are not legitimate, that could lead to killing, because it's like having a cult group. We also know that there are cult groups in South Africa, yes, organized by Nigerians.
In fact, South Africa sometimes can be described as a very, very violent society. It has seemed like this. It used to be worse than that. But specifically, the diaspora office has also said that there are instances that a few bad eggs in Nigeria, among Nigerians living abroad, indulge in anything against the law of their host. And where there is that, they must be accountable to the law. However, all Nigerians should not be painted with the same brush of criminalizing all Nigerians.
Well, the fact that there are instances of what one may loosely refer to as Nigerian on Nigerian violence. South Africa has one of the highest crime rates in the world. Yeah. Violent crime rates, murder, rape, armed robbery, and so on and so forth. And so, unfortunately, Nigerians themselves get to be collateral victims, in the course of some of these instances, plus incidents of xenophobia, which are now targeted attacks against foreigners, Mozambicans, Zimbabweans, Zambians, and especially Nigerians. Again, because the economic numbers are not quite salutary in South Africa today. The economy has been facing severe challenges in a number of years. So that's partly what will explain what's playing out in South Africa. Let's return to the headlines.
Yes, now the Nigerian pilot, let's go to Nigerian pilot, below the nameplate of Nigerian pilot. Nigerian doctor discovers new treatment for prostate cancer. Well, some pretend. We read that in the other story. That may be something entirely new. We'll find out. Then Khan condemns killing of Enugu Catholic priest. It's on page 43. No to revolution, says presidency. It's on page 8. Election more appropriate for change. That's the rider to that. And now below the photo story here, federal government budgets 2.2 billion naira for Roga. And there are other stories at the bottom. It says DSS moves Shawara to Abuja, may be charged for terrorism. It's on page 8. Deteriorating NAS complex gets 4 billion naira presidential facelift pledge. It's on page 6. Boko Haram fighters killed by NAF jets, hideouts destroyed. And then transform Almajiri system to avoid looming danger, says University Dawn. It's on page 13. NLC says members not involved in Shaura's mass protest. It's on page 5.
Okay, by Kyria, just before I take the headlines in Daily Trust, the headline that Kyria read from the Nigerian pilot with regard to the movement of Shawara from Lagos to Abuja. And by the way, Shawara used to be a student union leader in the 90s at the University of Lagos. The headline there says he's been moved that he may be charged for terrorism.
Yes.
Okay, well, I'm sure that the appropriate authorities know what to do and how to draft the charges. But it would appear that on the face of it, there's nothing that has happened so far that we can claim or say that it's anything near terrorism. So that if you want to have a tight case, frame your charges appropriately.
Yeah, framing of charges is very important. When Bayo was reading out the meaning of revolution, according to political scientists, right? So I think that's where they draw their inference, based on, what Bayo read out, because when you talk about revolution, it does mean a lot of things, that come from different perspectives. So, like Kingsley said, proper structuring of whatever allegation you're going to put against him, it should be done well, or you lose that at the end of the day.
That's right. Bayo,
talking about court orders.
Yeah, I'm just going to take some other headlines and I'll return to you. Daily Trust newspaper. Below the nameplate, there are 3 headlines there, but 2 of them we've already discussed extensively, but I take one on. That's controversy over Emirates' extra flights to Nigeria. That Emirates now having 4 daily flights into and out of Nigeria, 2 into Lagos and 2 out of Abuja. Details of that story can be found on page 17. Oil States stuck in 1.3 trillion naira debt trap. And right at the foot of the front page there of the paper, medical trip, that's the kicker, Zagzaki, so no fate today, that's page 4. Court stops National Assembly from taking over Edo Assembly, that's page 6. Another sad incident again, part of the profile of the U.S. these days, 29 killed in 2 U.S. mass shootings, that's on page 41.
That U.S. shooting in U.S. has become
the second one.
Within 24 hours. Yes. I have 2,
Under 24 hours.
24 hours, exactly. Yeah.
Different locations. 29 casualties, and the latest one, that's the price they have to pay for freedom of possessing guns. Meanwhile, Federal High Court at Port Harcourt has restrained the National Assembly, the police, the Department of State from sealing off or taking over the functions of the State House of Assembly. This is sequel to the other interim injunction sought by the Deputy Speaker of Edo State of Assembly, a member representing Ipoba and Oka in the State House of Assembly. Also, Governor Obaseki is also precluded from issuing a fresh proclamation. This perhaps brings to the 2 such interim orders that has been issued on the Edo case. The first was by Benin High Court, which restrained the APC, the Inspector General of Police, the Commissioner of Police Edo State, and the Publicity Secretary of APC from doing anything that will restrain Edo State from carrying out his activities. Meanwhile, the interesting report which Kingsley read there is about oil states among the highest debtors in Nigeria. The report is saying that oil-producing states, and there are 9 of them, have a total domestic debt of about 1.25 trillion as at March 2019. And by that data, the data is from Debt Management Office. There are 9 oil-producing states between June 1999 and December 2018, they received a total of 44.68 trillion from Federation accounts. That is in consonance with 13% derivation. And the paper is saying that this is aside from the monthly statutory allocation from the Federation account. So what are the observations? They say for 19 years now, the NICE have actually earned about 44 trillion. And debt is the consequence of this. And the report is that there is a lack of economic planning in their expenditure. There is absence of development specialists. Governments in those NICE states have indulged in building white elephant projects, and therefore there is disjointed and irrelevance in many of the projects. NAT has also observed that oil money creates a false impression of wealth, and therefore they are advising the states to take loans for only things that are needed. The other interesting story I would like to draw attention to is a dean at the science-based faculty of the University of Abuja is reported to be embroiled in another sting operation for a Sex for Mark award. The Daily Trust reports that a dean was at the hotel in Gwarimpa where he had booked to solicit illicit sex from a lady. The lady had reported to the university security and police, and she was advised to play along. And therefore, they planned a sting operation. The Lugbe police station is the one in charge of University of Abuja, but they work with the Gwarimpa police station, and the dean was promptly arrested. At the university has set up a committee. The dean has been issued a query, and the new vice chancellor, we are told, is a no-nonsense man who has zero tolerance for misconduct.
Kingsley and I, we are discussing this, before now, because I saw it on the social media, and we're not discussing it, Why has this persisted, Kingsley, over the year? I mean...
Well, it's a topic I believe that we have to examine in greater detail. You recall the story of the Obafemi Awolowo University lecturer who harassed, or allegedly harassed a postgraduate student. And there was the audio recording of that. And then this one is following for it. So
there was one that followed from you. Is it University of Lagos or Lagos State University?
Yeah.
Soon after that.
Yes, Lagos State University, that's right.
And this one. I think there are two perspectives to it. Student ladies particularly, and in fact boys particularly who could fall victims of female lecturers, should be encouraged to report such instances. On the other hand, students too and lecturers too should have the courage to throw out students who come and say, Oga, I like your subject, but I'm prepared to do anything to pass it. I find it difficult. Those are the ones that usually tempt.
I think, as Kingsley said, maybe one of these days we'll have that as a topic and discuss the different perspectives to it. Yeah. Now, let's go to the editorial for today, taken from the New Telegraph. Sanitizing Nigeria's political system. Just one paragraph. Not too long ago, the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, announced its desire to prune down the number of political parties in the country. Currently, there are 91 political parties which took part in the 2019 general elections. Of the lot, only the All Progressive Congress, APC, and PDP made the substantial showing in the polls. A few other parties also got some seats, but in all, 91 political parties, not more than 6, won anything in the 2019 elections. Bayo.
Yes, indeed. Of the 91 political parties, only 73 contested the presidential election. Normally, when you are a political party and you don't contest election, why are you in existence? But there have been instances because the idea of deregistering or refusing to register political parties had been on for a long time. If you recall, late Gani Fawehinmi had in the year 2002 actually challenged the INEC, and when INEC ruled, the court ruled in favor and got the National Conscience Party registered. That opened the floodgate for which many political parties got registration. These days, you have political parties that are described as briefcase political parties. They exist in name, they have offices, but they have no presence across the country. And if anything is, any critical observation, particularly if we have to go by the last election, the editorial is saying many of them ended up endorsing candidates, which means that they had no grounds on their own to contest the election. But don't also forget, in 2013, a federal high court in Abuja said INEC had no business deregistering political parties. It was in conflict with freedom of association. So there comes the dilemma. political parties need to be registered, but we have political parties that virtually exist by name and are not operational. So what do we do?
Well, Bayo, would like to thank you. But just one point before you leave. With regard to the associational right embedded in the freedom of association and the Constitution on which the court ruled at the time, there has been an amendment to the Constitution, and that is to be found in the 4th alteration. And that alteration provides the grounds upon which the electoral management body, in this case, Independent National Electoral Commission, could deregister political parties. And those grounds are stipulated. There are certain, you must meet a certain threshold.
Criteria.
Yes, for you to continue in existence as a political party. So it's now part of the Constitution.
So
and that
the ball
must be
is
read.
now in the court of INEC.
It's not in the court of INEC. But the only narrow escape that political parties would have is that if they win a chairmanship election in a local council election, for instance, then they escape the hammer.
That is a safety valve.
That's a safety valve for them. If they win any seats, in the course of local elections. But those elections are usually, this is part of the conflict. I'm getting to another discussion now.
Another issue, Kingsley, is are you sure that any political party that is deregistered cannot go back to court, to seek for registration? What I may suggest, is a situation where you classify or grade political parties. You can operate at local government level. You can operate at the state level. Everybody must not come to the national level to start campaigning for producing a president when you don't have the wherewithal to do that.
Kieran, you're absolutely right. But then if you examine the details of the 4th alteration, that would, in my opinion, tend to provide that valve. Or if you want to concentrate on local council elections, concentrate on local council elections.
Yes.
And by the way, also, if a state government fails to conduct a local government election, on what basis then can you deregister a political party?
Yes.
And we have a number of states that have not conducted, they have all these caretaker
committees.
All right, Bayo.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot for being around. See you tomorrow. Okay, it's Good Morning Nigeria, still on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We're taking a short break now. When we return, of course, we'll get ahead with our principal issue for conversation this morning.
They are there at the crack of dawn. They are there busy preparing while we rise for our day. They are there silently. First line of defense and our alarm.
They will be inaugurated, but it is heartwarming that we've been told that an orientation program is being arranged for the incoming ministers. And so I want to believe that in that orientation program, the incoming ministers should be made to realize that the country is passing through so much at this moment, and therefore, this is not the usual come and chop. They have not been called or assembled to come and help themselves. So even if we are believing that it was just a mere ambition just to be made a minister, in that orientation program, they should be made to realize that Nigeria is passing through so much, and it's a very critical period in our national life. Security is, of course, a very worrisome issue in Nigeria. And therefore, in that orientation program, I want to believe that they will tell whoever is going to man the Ministry of Youth, for instance. Of course, that person will not be a young person from what we have seen. Now, whoever will man the Ministry of National Planning and Budget, Ministry of Finance, Education, and all other ministries should be made to realize that the security challenges we are facing in Nigeria today is as a result of failures in the critical sectors of the country, in the economy, in education, unemployment, in agriculture, and what have you. And therefore, that their efforts in manning their various ministries will contribute very immensely towards tackling the security challenges that we have in the country. Therefore, what we are saying is that the activities, the actions, the contributions of various ministries in, for instance, reducing unemployment, in, for instance, reducing the number of persons who are out of school, in, for instance, opening up opportunities in the agri sector, in, for instance, helping to build national integration, nation building at this point, where everybody is talking about regions, everybody is reclining into various identity cleavages, and therefore these ministers should be made to realize that their various contributions, their various activities and actions will contribute immensely towards, of course, tackling the national security challenges that we have in the country. And so irrespective of whatever ministry you are assigned to, you have a very serious task at your hands.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Ernest Oreke. Now let's bring in again Binta Muazu.
Yes.
What are your thoughts going forward?
My thought as a politician is that democracy or government of the present government is a government that is meant to be served for the nation, for the people. Invariably, let me say, government is for the people, by the people, and for the people, which means that whatever thing government is going to do should emphasize on giving the right service to the country and to see that they improve the welfare of the people in general. My two colleagues here have made so much emphasis on the values of good governance. And of course, there won't be good governance without peace. So the problem of security has to be tackled. That is the most important thing. And then apart from that, the ministers are the representatives of the president. President cannot be everywhere, but they are the representative of the president, whereby they are expected to discharge their duties according to the agenda or policies of the government. What I want the ministers to know is that they are there not for themselves, but for the people, and to render services that will better all Nigerians. If in general everything is improved, there will be peace and there will be harmony in general. So what I want the ministers to have in mind is to believe that they are there to help all Nigerians, not their own political associates, and not to do anything that at least will increase more insecurity or more unemployment. So, and I'm happy that the government has set an induction program, which is coming up. Through that induction program, some of the ministers that are first-timers will be able to know their do's and don'ts. And those that have been there, coming back for the second time, they will look at it and see where they've not done well, they will improve on that.
All right. It's also interesting to note that most of the ministers are first-timers, right? And they really need such orientation, as you pointed out. And let's go to Professor Oka Martin Obono, Professor of Sociology and Population Studies at University of Ibadan. Of course, we've listened to other guests. Where do we go from here?
Thank you. Where we go from here is to recognize that the screening of the ministerial nominees, which took place in the 9th, obviously left a lot to be desired as far as the optics were concerned. The truth needs to be spoken consistently in order for this country to make good promise of its democratic potentials. The Senate came into existence with an identity sword of Damocles hanging over its head, where it strenuously tried to demonstrate that it would not be a rubber stamp assembly. Now, the optics of the screening process that took place did very little to assuage the anxiety of Nigerians and international observers in that regard. While it is in order to extend courtesy to former legislators and so on, there are other ways of doing that without betraying the trust that is incumbent upon the Senate to also provide civic education on what's happening in the country through the screening process. A situation where people bow and go fails educationally, because then we do not even get a chance as citizens to know what the fundamentals are, and then also lose the opportunity to invite commentary and contribution by well-meaning Nigerians, because the whole estate of this nation belongs to all of us. And people from different quarters are in a position, whether it's in civil society, academia, or in journalism, are in a position to contribute to that process. We simply lost that opportunity. And then we have heard, I believe, the Senate President saying that we would institute the bow and go situation in the Constitution. That would be a mistake. That would clearly be a dangerous mistake. We can extend courtesy to those we wish to extend courtesy, but we should not deprive the nation. Jeff Sessions, Attorney General of the immediate past Attorney General of the United States, was a senator throughout, and he also commanded the respect and admiration of his colleagues. Yet he was grilled for that office. Hillary Clinton was not only a senator, but a former first lady. So if you are talking about gender friendliness, the idea of asking the female nominees to also bow and go is not the way to actually establish respect for gender. We need to show that those who are going to serve the nation are competent and that they can hold their own. Many of them did so when they were given the opportunity. Festus Keyamo, Babatunde, Fashola, Sunday, Dare. So asking people to just bow and go does very little to respect them. And then even screening people without portfolio, we need to say it. That kind of practice needs to stop. It is, for instance, like in my university, asking people who have finished secondary school to just come in, bow, and then enter any class they like, whether they are qualified for it or not. Or in an aeronautic training center where we are training pilots. Instead of giving them a qualifying exam, we ask them to just bow and go. Or surgeons or medical doctors. You will kill people that way. So if this is the case, it's almost akin to saying that those who are going to pilot the ministerial affairs of this nation have not yet shown their fit with the portfolios that will ultimately emerge. Screening should be screening in terms of the kind of appointment that you are going to have. So I really think, with due respect, obviously, the nominees that we have, it was a galaxy of stars. Those people are competent, they've done very well, but that's not the issue. The issue is that they needed to have been screened in relation to the portfolios that they will hold. And if that had been done, the kind of conversation emerging from your eminent discussants on your panel there would be the kind of thing that the Senate would have brought to bear in that process. For instance, securitizing all the ministries. If the first function of government is actually, provision and protection of security of lives and property, the agriculture cannot even exist without security. The educational system will collapse, health too, if there is no security. So the ministers could have also had a chance to provide an indication of the security threats that are also affecting the portfolios that they are wielding. So we know how to push resources around, to prioritize attention in order to ensure that when they then get going, insecurity does not undermine their performance on the job. I think it was a very sad and wasted opportunity that we had there. And it did very little to show the Senate as the last bastion of hope for the common citizen in this country.
All right, Professor Obono, thank you very much for the points that you have raised. Of course, Kirian, you know that this is an issue that has come up repeatedly, especially in the Fourth Republic, with regard to the non-assignment of portfolios to nominees who are to be screened, either as commissioners or as ministers.
There's no reason ever that has been put out as to why you don't assign portfolio to someone that you are screening to man a particular sector. It's for instance, when you hear the senators ask questions there, they will say, assuming you are giving this position, what will you? So, you know, I don't know.
Yeah, I think, as you said, we just might have to get it right at some point that when there are nominees, portfolios are also assigned, which will not preclude the president from reshuffling his cabinet members from time to time. Yeah, but let's return to Professor Tahir Mama. Professor Tahir Mama, when you look at the ministerial nominees who've now been screened and are waiting inauguration, it's quite a broad range of experiences and kaleidoscope of different individuals. A number of governors, a number of former ministers themselves, and persons who have made, some successes in whatever areas that they have operated. But the question then arises from what you said earlier. How might the cabinet philosophize the issue of continuity, consolidation, and the clear recognition that this is a legacy term? President Buhari has now less than 4 years. In fact, probably now has 3 years and just about 10 months or so for the remainder of his term. So how do you philosophize this and then use it as a guiding principle for the operation of the administration against the background of what you indicated earlier with regard to security now being an overarching threat to everything else in the country?
Well, thank you. There have been a very loud complaint, actually, in spite of what you have said about the diversity, broad spectrum of the background of the cabinet. But I didn't see economists. You know, I have not seen economists in that cabinet. And there's a loud complaint also from the intelligentsia. Unlike the previous cabinet, we don't have people from the academia there. And yes, there are a couple of people with PhDs, but that's a different matter altogether from having people from really who are into research and ideas generation, generally speaking. And but despite that, I think the starting point is for them to recognize the shortness of the period of the government. They have just barely 3 years now really to work. So that gives some urgency in what they need to do. And by then, the government, at least the president, would have spent 8 years in government. So they have to demonstrate that it's not an wasted 8 years. And all those infrastructure projects which government have put as a priority need to accomplish certain mileage now. Power needs to attain a certain level. You know, by the time the government will be handing over in 2023. And then even for the party, for the APC as a party, for it to have the hope to continue, the government has to deliver. PDP ruled this country for 60 years. And we can't go into what they did and what they didn't do. Now it is the legacy period for the president to show, okay, 8 years, this party has been entrusted with power. This is what it's been able to achieve. And in terms of also coordination of the nation, you know, a lot of times we tend to focus attention on federal government, whereas 50% of expenditure and governance happens at the state level. But the federal government needs to coordinate to some extent, although I say to some extent because some of the states are governed by other parties. So it cannot direct. And even in the nature of intergovernmental relationships, it has to be a sort of persuasion. And something gratifying is happening. I think if I remember well, the Office of the Secretary of the Government has been coordinating with the other states, Secretary of the Government of the states, coordinate policies, you know, and that's how it should be. There are certain areas of the economy where the role of the federal government is actually to set policy and framework. And for federal government will key in, states will key in, especially those areas on the concurrent legislative list of the Constitution. And even in those areas where the federal government actually have exclusive responsibility, there's a way it can delegate a lot of authority to the states and even the federal governments, which are federal government agencies which are operating at that level. So there's so much which can be done through this coordination. And then the area of justice. Much of what we are having now, experiencing in terms of security, has to do with failure of our justice sector. You know, in terms of the workings of the judiciary, they seem to be so, in terms of orientation, as I have said many times on fora, those managers justice sector need to understand, have a different orientation of their role. Yes, people have rights, individual rights must be respected, but we need to recognize that, you know, the first right is that of the country as a nation. You know, so we need to understand that the most important thing is for us to secure and ensure justice for Nigeria, you know, as a country. And so in a situation where there's too much focus on protecting criminals, allowing criminals to use the shield of justice to protect themselves. For instance, all those cases which are lying around in the hundreds in courts, you know, as a result of corruption and all that, shouldn't be there. These trials should be concluded within 1 year, if not less. So there should be a serious conversation between the Attorney General, you know, and the heads of various courts in Nigeria to work out rules of court that will ensure that cases are dispensed with as quickly as possible. And then part of the problem self-help we seem to be noticing around the country. You know, militia all over the place, you know, ethnic, you know, resort to self-help. All these are really, they underscore the failure of the justice system. Because if somebody is arrested, for instance, for robbery or kidnapping, and then he can have his day in court within 3 months or 6 months, people will see what has been done. So there will be no need for anybody to resort to self-help. So there has to be a serious conversation at that level between, as I said, the executive, represented by the Attorney General, and the heads of the courts in Nigeria. And then issues of unemployment. By official statistics, we have about 21 million people right now out of job in the country. Now, this is, most of it have to do with graduates from universities. But I always prefer to look at the figures from WAEC and from JAM. You know, every year, about 1.7, 1.8 people, students write, do their JAM, and barely 10% of that number get admitted into universities and polytechnics. The rest are all within our community. And it is worse, of course, with secondary school, where millions and millions of people are affected. Where are they? You find them all over the place. That's why when there's a traffic problem out there, before you know it, you find tens and tens and hundreds of able-bodied youth. So this is a big time bomb which the government needs to pay attention to.
Okay. Oh, all right, thank you. You've raised a good number of issues here, you know, from judiciary to education. And let's return to Dr. Reke once more. In your opening comments, you made mention of failures of critical sectors of the economy. And in this country, it's never been a challenge when it comes to policy articulation or developing of blueprints and what have you. But what the nation has witnessed over the years, perhaps a poor implementation of such policies is in so many, in all strata of our national life. We have uncompleted projects, abandoned projects, projects that were allocated huge sums of money. And at the end of the day, nothing is shown. I heard the chairman of the ruling party saying that they will give no more excuses to Nigerians as it is at the moment. And the Nigerians are now expecting for them to deliver. And of course, even the immediate past Minister of Transportation also said the same thing. What should we expect, going forward with respect to the way and manner the cabinet should carry out their responsibilities to ensure that at the end of this tenure, that Nigerians will be celebrating some level of development in all sectors of our national life?
Well, I think even the president himself has told us what to expect, and we want to believe that he will be a man of his words. When he said that in the next administration, his next administration, that he is going to be scaling things up. And then, of course, we know that the campaign slogan was next level. And therefore, we expect that things should be higher, implementation of policies, execution of projects, implementation of the national budget also should be better than we saw in the last 4 years. Presentation of the budget should be earlier than we saw in the last 4 years, so that the National Assembly can go through the entire process of appropriation, scrutinizing the bill before it is passed into law. So we expect that this time, as Kingsley rightly said, this is a legacy period for Muhammadu Buhari. If he doesn't leave a legacy this time, then all the while that he has been struggling to become Nigerian president will be a wasted effort and time. And so it is expected that this time around, he will be very hard on the ministers to ensure that they deliver to the promises, to the campaign promises, to the manifesto, to the programs contained in the APC manifesto. And so I expect that this time around, if there is a minister that is a weak, the weak link in the chain, I'm expecting that the president should drop such a minister, because he really doesn't have the time again. We are talking about barely 3 years. And we know that within the 3 years, by 2021, everybody is already talking about the next round of elections. And so people will no longer be looking up to the president. People will be looking up to those who will be angling to become, next president. And so I expect that this time around, the president should be very, very hard on these ministers to deliver, because this is the only opportunity he has to leave a lasting legacy in Nigeria.
Dr. Oreke, thank you. I just tempted to go very quickly to Professor Obono in our Ibadan Network Center. Professor Obono, in addition to all the issues that have been raised, including the ones that you also pointed out, I was just wondering, if we frame President Buhari's second term now as the legacy tenure, what would you like to see in the management of the political economy, considering all the matters that will most likely arise, as Oreke just drew our attention to? By 2021, everybody is talking about succession, which will be 2023. So effectively, you have just 2 years, and all the issues surrounding security, who will take over, who will not take over, which zone will bring president, which zone will not bring president. So for the remainder of the period for effective governance, what would you like to see?
I have a fundamentally different orientation about what this period and this tenure in this highly promising administration portends. I'm usually uncomfortable when the question of legacy becomes the primary focus of governance, in which case it becomes idiosyncratic. The targets that are set without intending to become self-serving, it becomes egotistical. We should set aside the issue of legacy for now. What we need to do is the right thing. On a daily basis, 90.8 million Nigerians are living in extreme poverty. And I dare say the number is higher, because that calculation is based on World Bank computations of those who live on less than $1.6 per day, which actually works out to 20,000 naira per month. And until April this year, even those who were working were earning a minimum wage of 18,000 naira. So, in other words, far more than 90.8 million Nigerians are living in extreme poverty. The eradication of poverty, indeed, is the first of 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Legacy becomes a very secondary issue when we realize that we need to get them out of that condition immediately. We need to put the children of parents who find themselves in those conditions in school and guarantee their continued stay there, because that will be the legitimate pathway out of recycling that poverty. We need to instantly reassure Nigerians that Nigeria itself is a worthwhile enterprise, that the insecurity, massive, with many manifestations in the forms of insurgency in the northeast, militancy, secessionist tendencies, Nigeria is now speaking a language which used to constitute political heresy. People can freely and glibly say they want out of this nation. This is very dangerous, at the very least, extremely disturbing. We need to spend this term to stabilize this. Justice is an issue, as we've just learned, but the economy too. If you look at the relationship between education and the market in Nigeria, that model, which I shall quickly describe, can only produce the massive unemployment we find. That people grow up in one institution, namely the family, and then when they get to a certain age, they are transferred to a secondary institution, in this case, a school. And then after they graduate, ultimately, you then expect them to find employment. That model can only create a backlog of unemployed graduates. So we need to bring that economy, that market, that private sector together with the educational process. Look at some countries are already creating solar panels and, in fact, thinking of exporting to countries like Nigeria, and these African countries. We have engineering departments in virtually all universities in this country. Why can the curricula of these engineering departments, for instance, not be geared towards the production of consumable panels and inverters and batteries that we can export to the rest of West Africa and consume at the subsistence level, so that while the students are learning, they are earning at the same time? By the time they graduate into managerial positions, not as first-timers. We can do that for law. We can do that for geography, the same model that you have in medicine and in nursing. This will be a very instrumental way of ensuring by going to school, just by going to school, you are eliminating a critical mass of unemployed graduates. We can do this in the next 3 years. We can take care of security. We can reassure Nigerians that Nigeria is worth living for. We can get rid of those marauders on our highways that are indiscriminately shooting people, spraying bullets at people going about their legitimate business. There needs to be government response. This silence is too deafening, and in some quarters appears incriminating. Those are the things we need to deal with instantly. And then if the legacy comes, the legacy comes. But we cannot start a priori, should not start ab initio saying the fundamental aim of this term is to create a legacy for anybody at all. We need to assure Nigerians that it was worth having the administration that they voted for. And that should be, I think, the marching order for all the ministerial nominees as we move forward. That simply is my take.
Thank you indeed, Professor Oka Martin Obono, for your analysis. But I will just take you a little back. I'm not asking you this question because I want to address the issue of legacy, because we believe that to leave a good legacy after one's tenure in office is a function of good governance, which will, of course, tackle all the issues that you have raised. So leaving a good legacy and addressing all the issues you have raised should also be a focus. But you have made a very valid points there. And what I would take home from what you've said is that of a model of education, because these days we find, unemployable graduates. Let's say graduates that cannot do anything, especially engineers, who should be known for some practical jobs. But when they come out, they don't know anything about the practical reality of the course they studies.
Well, Kieran, you and I are not the guests. There are several responses you can make to that.
Yes.
Now, if the economy had been expanding at a much higher percentage than we have seen over the years, then as the graduates are coming out of their institutions, they have industries to go to work. So graduates don't on their own create jobs ordinarily. And the jobs will be out there, in the environment. Of course, some of them who are creative enough, could have jobs.
And one professor was talking about why can't civil engineer, as the undergraduate or civil engineer, why can't they construct the roads in their school, roads leading to the school proper? Let that be a kind of a practical aspect of their jobs. So by the time they are through with that course, they can as well construct all these roads that we're asking people to come and do from outside Nigeria.
How many universities in Nigeria have the facilities to teach those students those skills that will translate into constructing those roads? You only need to visit universities in Nigeria. How many universities have the kind of facilities? How many universities can operate really? How many of our universities can operate within the 21st century?
Okay, well, Dr. Ernest Oreke, I hope you are not an ASU official at the University of Abuja, because that's always been one of their complaints. But of course, these are serious issues that have been raised. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll continue with the conversation.
Chief. Good morning, sir. You are here already?
No. Now my spirit day, my body day for house. What kind of question is that? Were you not the one that fixed this meeting for 8 a.m.? You are now coming by 10 a.m. and start asking me jab questions.
But Chief, now, I'm sorry. Don't you also go late for meetings sometimes? You know now, African time.
No more African time. And no more pancaking of face during office hours. At the end of the day, we will lose valuable time. We will not make progress. If we want to move this nation forward, we must treat business as business and respect time. Change begins with me.
Thank you, sir. I am sorry. Can we go for the meeting now, Chief?
Later.
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Well, we are still on Good Morning Nigeria for this Monday, and we are discussing agenda setting for the new ministers. Let's go to Binta Muaz. Binta, of course, we've been having this conversation for a while now, and you listen to Professor Obono, you listen to Professor Mamman, and of course Dr. Oreke. They have touched almost on all aspects, of development life. Now, what would be your take, when it comes to the next move, vis-a-vis, of course, you're a politician. I'm sure you are in APC.
Yes,
exactly. So, your party manifesto is what Nigerians are looking forward to. Want to see the practicality of this manifesto. How will it work?
Let me say that I've listened to all of them, and they have addressed so many issues, and they are in line with what is happening, of course. But I want to say that in every government, implementation or governance, at the end of the day, they leave a legacy. So I believe President Muhammadu Buhari, when he is completing his tenure, of course, he will leave a legacy that will show how good his government is and how it has affected the common man. In our party manifesto, of course, we are now in the next level. We have started on the improvement of security, which has done very well, and then also railway and other sectors have also done their best. And I believe in this next level, there will be improvement in so many ways. But what I want to say is this. I believe this government is going to set a monitoring team, or rather a monitoring committee, whereby it will be assessing the performance of all the ministries. That is, the ministers, how their performances are going to be. It won't be like the other tenure, whereby there was no reshufflement and all the ministers had it in their own ways. But I'm quite sure in this next level, there will be improvement and there will be assessment of their performances. And I think so far so good with what I've seen, and with this planned induction or orientation program, that indicates that it's not going to be as usual what transpired in the other tenure. So this time around, there will be improvement in all sectors by monitoring the ministers and also all other organizations that are there to render services to the nation.
Okay, thank you very much, Binta Mawazo. Dr. Ina Sereke, there's something that we're talking about, the educational system, but I still would like us to examine the issues that are likely to engage the attention of the cabinet and, of course, the president with regard to managing the political economy. What are the likely distractions, or what are the likely enablers that will ensure that at the end of the day, when you take a look at the numbers, somebody will say, all right, fine, this is a good score, or no, this isn't a fair score?
Yeah, fine. One is that, excuse me, of course, we realize that there are so many agitations in the country. These agitations are informed by different issues and different things. Some people have felt that they have not been properly, accommodated within the last 4 years. And so there is the cry of marginalization. And there is also the issue, as Prof. Mentioned earlier, about people talking about seceding, about regionalism and all of that. And so it means that at this point, we have to be looking at national building and integration, really. We have to devise policies that will address these issues, these divisive issues that are unsettling, the nation. And so the issue of nation building and integration should be prime in this administration. And therefore, the way the ministers will carry on, in the next 3 years will really help in that regard. Now, having said that also, the issue of security, like I said earlier, is not just something that the Ministry of Defense will be left with. Now, like you said, it is a political economy thing. It's a political economy approach that has to be adopted in addressing this issue, because we have to be looking at human security this time around. It is no longer about force. Human security will entail that you have to meet the basic needs of the people, apart from meeting the basic needs of the people in order to reduce those factors that, incline people towards taking to crime, you also have to adopt another approach of mediation and conciliation. And because it is no longer about force all the time. And I've noticed, really, that the Nigerian security architecture panders so much to panic measures. And panic measure, of course, when you study terrorism, you discover that the terrorists really want you to panic. And that is why they do what they do. Now, but by the time you do not panic, you have taken one step towards defeating the terrorist or the criminal. But once we begin to take these panic measures, and of course, when you are panicky, you adopt the fire brigade approach that we are always seeing, and therefore you do not think through the policies, the programs, the ideas that you are implementing. And so this panicky approach towards security, for instance, today we are faced with the Free Showore movement because the country panicked simply because he mentioned revolution now. And so the security forces were panicked and therefore went after him. And now even those who were not aware of what Showore was talking about are today, aware of what he was saying and are beginning to sympathize with him because of the panicky approach that we adopted, towards, handling that issue. And so I believe that in the next 3 years or thereabout, this panicky approach towards everything in the country should, be dropped. Again, also is the issue of the rule of law. We heard the former Attorney General saying that, yes, he disobeyed court orders on the basis of national security. But then if we are a democracy is built on the principle of rule of law, and we should begin to respect that.
Okay, Dr. Sereke, would like to thank you very much. Just want to carry on.
Let's return to Professor Obono. Professor Obono, you've listened to Dr. Sereke and all the contributions he has made. But our guests this morning have all agreed that there can be no meaningful development in an atmosphere of rancor, in an atmosphere where security is not guaranteed. I'd like you to proffer solutions to the security problems, which of course are multidimensional as we have it today. What are the specific things you would want to see government to do to see how we can secure the nation? Because that's the major issue you raised, in your last comment. What can government do, in your own opinion?
Yeah, and indeed, your panelists have profiled and drawn out lines of the security issues most competently. Now, what do we do has to do with an understanding of where this insecurity is coming from. Beyond the external threats to our peaceful coexistence, let's, for a start, talk about the internal stressors. There are systemic issues. If people have diversity, that's a good thing. But diversity, as we are rapidly seeing, is not enough to ensure peaceful coexistence. That diversity has to be transformed into interdependence. Dependence is the worst form of condition a human being or group of people can find themselves in. At a higher level, call it next level, is independence, which we secured in 1960. But you have to go beyond independence to interdependence of the independent parts. We have to make each of the geopolitical zones, first of all, profitable unto itself by transforming each of the geopolitical zones into geo-economic zones corresponding to the available resources, minerals, and the ecology. Out of the 6 ecosystems in West Africa, 4 are represented in Nigeria. So there's a natural diversity of the terrain, of the environment. And some are closer to the coast, some are closer to the desert. All this can be viewed as opportunities. The UAE model, the model of the United Arab Emirates, in this special instance, is something instructive for our own diversity. If we develop the Northeast in terms of abilities, competencies, and resources available there, and they can export, as it were, to the rest of the geo-economic zones in Nigeria, and then at the next step to the rest of West Africa, and they depend on the other geo-economic zones, I'm speaking advisedly now, for trade and their own subsistence. Manufacturing that will maintain their own industrial enterprise coming from the southeast. Secession will not arise from the southeast because they need that interdependence of the north central, of the north south, of the northwest, and so on. We have a huge amount of work to do in Nigeria. I don't want to use a word which will now distract attention from what I'm saying. Once people realize that the bread on their table, the education in the heads of their children, and the opportunities that they pursue as citizens of this great nation are made possible through collaboration with other ethnicities in this country, you have already started stabilizing the system in such a way that the apprehensions, the hysterias that arise from a view of scarcity and paranoia that we are not getting a fair shake in this system, and so we have to take it by force, we would have sublimated those tensions. We would indeed have sublimated those tensions. Then the justice that one of the panelists was talking about. Lawmaking also has an international dimension. That's unquestionable. But a lot of the health issues, a lot of the democratic dividends, a lot of the laws actually nestle at the local level. Why should we have representatives at the state level and then another order of representatives at the national level when the speakers of the 36 assemblies, state assemblies, can actually constitute for us a three-man national assembly? And then we pack onto those representatives from the traditional leadership, from the civil society sector, and what have you. A three-man kind of assembly. So that when they are speaking at the center, they are speaking directly in terms of what they have heard their own constituents say.
All right, Professor Bono, thank you very much. Just to indicate that our viewers have sent in a torrent of tweets, so we just want to go through some of those tweets now and go back to our guests to take their comments before we wrap up today's program. Omagbola Babs has this tweet. The incoming ministers must place Nigeria above self. It's only in doing so that a minister will work for the common people and not for their family alone. Nigeria must be their priority. The president has a mandate to deliver, and the ministers must help him to achieve that. Kieran.
All right, from Sani Michael Amokaji, fixed power sector and our death trap routes, every other thing will fall in place. We talk of lack of investment, but we fail to understand that no investor will invest in a nation where there is a serious deficit in infrastructure such as ours. Let's walk our talk, our blueprints.
This is Dele Jack Solomon. Now, all ministers should endeavor to reduce the cost of governance in their ministries by taking a look at the remuneration of political office holders and reduce the number of unnecessary political offices in each ministry. It is not the ministers that fix the remuneration of political office holders. That's the business of the revenue mobilization, allocation, and fiscal.
All right, from Festus Akimbo, as soon as the PNB inaugurates the new cabinet, they should immediately roll out positive and optimistic agenda that can address our many challenges, especially in the area of security, education, health, and infrastructure. All the incoming ministers have their work cut out for them, and they must hit the ground running. There's urgent need to address insecurity that's giving Nigeria sleepless nights.
Now, Law Alpha says next, it says the ministers have their hands full of responsibilities. First, they should fix the economy, provide jobs for the youth, shun corruption, project the image of the country, and ensure a cordial relationship with other arms in order to deliver their mandate.
All right, Danladi Ndaebo, a performance appraisal system should be put in place to evaluate the productivity of the new ministers in relation to pre-established objectives of the various ministries. It is no longer advisable to rely on the fake meeting press briefing to address their performance.
Now, this is from Abosade Oluwayomike Abosade. I think the president did not include the portfolios for the nominees so that he would not be imposing his choice on the Senate. We saw that during the screening, the nominees were asked general questions in different fields, and that shows that they can function in any ministry and succeed. The nominees, Kyrian, are the president's choice. The Senate doesn't choose ministers for the president.
Exactly. All right. Aminu Haliru, let me begin by congratulating the ministers screened by National Assembly and also remind them that the masses are expecting beyond expectation from them, more especially sectors like economy, education, health, agriculture, security, workers' welfare, improved power supply, and also congratulations to those who made the list.
This is coming from Akeju Olagbaju. We need ministers that will not divert politics to their purposes, nor pursue agenda for selfish gain, but a committed minister that knows the importance of service to develop the country.
Zaki C. Professor Oka Martin can lecture the whole country. Big up, sir. What's it?
All right, Festus Akimboyewa has one last one here. I expect a big change from the past 4 years, and since a good number of the incoming ministers have had full ministerial experience, I expect them to know the mind of the president by now and work hard to translate his ideas into specific policies for the good of Nigerians. So those are some of the tweets that I would like to take in the meantime. We'd like to thank you for sending those tweets. Professor Tahir Mama, in terms of specifics and matters that the cabinet will encounter, assuming the cabinet has longevity along with the president's own tenure, by next year, the economic recovery and growth plan will expire because it was a medium-term agenda 2017 to 2020. And here we are, concerns have been raised as to the likely distractions from realizing the goals that were indicated in the growth plan. Those concerns are arising obviously from security challenges and the issues that we're having. From your point of view, what is required to be done in terms of tweaking the recovery growth plan or striving mightily to achieve the goals there in, say, the next 1 year before it is due for revision or for extension?
Well, the RG is usually a time-based arrangement by which government will be able to measure its performance over time. And as Hajia Binta mentioned earlier on, there used to be a unit in the presidency which for some time really have gone into gone moribund. That is in terms of project monitoring units. And I remember at one of our programs here, we said, look, the government has to go beyond these weekly reports at the Federal Executive Council. That is the agency that will go around the country, and assess the implementation, effectiveness of policies of government. Because by and large, ministers will play politics, but you need an independent body, to bring information as to what is happening around. I remember Fashola has been doing that through various meetings, especially in the area of power and even the roads. You find him moving around the country. So they have to go beyond reports in offices to engaging and informing the public about what is being achieved on all the mandates. Then there's an ongoing discussion which it's not catching the attention of the public yet, which is in terms of the pricing of fuel. Remember the governors last week or so, last 2 weeks,
2 weeks ago,
suggested to the government, to take the subsidy. Now, that's going to be a very huge decision because it will impact on everything and affect even the direction of the government's policy and how far it will be effective in other. And then it will not put the government actually in a collision path with the general public because, the general feeling is that, so look, the only thing we are getting from Nigerian state is cheap transport somehow, but the moment the price of fuel go up, it has all these, bargain typical effect on the population. So that's one element which the government needs to tackle very carefully. I know it is already, it has its back to the wall in terms of funding its budget. There's so much of debt accumulated over these 4 years, and to the extent people are even questioning whether we really will be able even to pay. So that's an issue.
All right, so we are just running out of time. We want to bring in Dr. Reke here. Dr. Reke, I want to speak to the issue of a relationship between the presidency and legislature. The oversight function of the National Assembly, actually centers on ministries and parastatals under those ministries, and that's another way of, checking, whether policies of government are adequately implemented. We had last time that some ministers actually refused to appear before panels at the National Assembly. So what should be the proper practice going forward?
Well, good enough. We were beginning to see that there is an improved working relationship between the executive and the legislature. And of course, Nigerians are worried that that kind of relationship may not augur well for our democracy, because people are feeling that we are having a rubber stamp National Assembly. But far from it, one thing people must realize is that the Senate President, one of his competencies as a legislator is actually oversight. He is a very experienced and serious person when it comes to oversight. And so I expect that going forward, irrespective of whatever friendly relationship that will exist between the executive and the legislature, as the head of the legislature in Nigeria, that the Senate President will bring his oversight experience to bear on the activities of the various committees of the National Assembly. And so I'm looking forward to a legislature that will be very tough on ministries, departments, and agencies of the executive, given the fact that, as I said earlier, that one of the legislative competencies of Farouk, of the Senate President, is oversight. So I'm expecting that it won't be like business as usual for the executive arm, even though people believe that this is going to be a rubber stamp. And then given this improved relationship, now we expect that ministers, heads of agencies, when summoned, will have to adhere to the summons of the National Assembly. After all, they have a better working relationship now, so nothing stops them from, going to the National Assembly. And then, of course, relevant documents and information that the National Assembly will require should also be made available to the National Assembly.
Reke, thank you very much. Binta Muazu, from the perspective of special interest groups, say women, beyond political appointments and so on and so forth, what will give the most joy?
The most joy that will be given to the women folk is to improve in inclusiveness of them in all ramifications. That is in appointments, in consideration, wherever they find themselves. They should be considered and be given more, what will I say?
I said beyond those appointments.
Yes, beyond that.
Yes, a topical issue any day. Beyond.
Okay,
yes.
okay. I'm looking at improvement on empowerment. They need to be considered more. That is by giving them more soft loans, and then assisting them in wherever they find themselves. Yes.
Okay. Right, that's beyond appointments. Anyway.
Yes, beyond appointments.
Thank you very much indeed. And
most especially empowerment.
Empowerment,
yes.
We would like to thank all of you for being part of this program. First, Professor Tahir Mamun, Vice Chancellor of Base University, Abuja. Well,
that's
thank you.
a pleasure.
Thank you. And Dr. Ernest Ereke, Department of Political Science and International Relations, University of Abuja. We thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Binta Moazu, it's a grassroots politician. It's been wonderful talking to you this morning.
Thank you.
And Professor Oka Martin Obono, you spoke to us from our Ibadan Network Center, and you are a professor of sociology and population studies, University of Ibadan. We appreciate your contribution this morning, and thank you very much indeed. All right, we go sports now.